All right, everybody. Another day of training camp is in the books. Let's talk about it. Yesterday was, I believe, day 5 of training camp for the Seahawks. Day number 6 today is going to be our first padded practice, so that should be especially interesting. We should be able to learn a little bit more than usual from something like that. But before we dive into that, let's keep the focus on what happened yesterday at the VMAC. Before we talk about what actually happened on the field and what players and coaches had to say, injury updates. Gabe Jackson got the day off, but no injury prompted it. It was just something that Carroll decided would be a good idea, which is reasonable because Gabe Jackson is a veteran. Bobby Wagner was absent, but not because of an injury. Apparently, he has some sort of serious family issue, so nothing going on there in terms of any kind of injury. Jamarco Jones got rolled up on, but he only missed, I think, one play and came back in. And Marquise Blair is back. And obviously, I know we have some Marquise Blair fans out there, so they're going to be very relieved to hear that. And other than that, it's the status quo. Dwayne Brown not practicing as expected. Jamal Adams not practicing as expected. And Dwayne Eskridge not practicing yet as expected, although that's a far more daunting situation, I think. Maybe not in terms of player value, but in terms of what can reasonably be expected right now. All right, so that out of the way, let's talk about what actually happened on the field and who showed out. Colby Parkinson. And if there's one positional group that seems to be doing very well so far this training camp, it does seem to be the tight end room. Gerald Everett has supposedly looked quite good, and Carroll had some very good, positive words about him, said that we have never had a receiver run as hard with the ball as Gerald Everett since his time in Seattle. Now, I don't know if I would say he runs harder than Golden Tate, but the fact that Carroll would point that out does mean something. So pretty excited about what the tight end room is doing and how it might tie into the new look offense. Colby Parkinson had 2 touchdowns and another long catch from Geno Smith. And by the way, Geno is supposedly playing great so far. So Sean Mannion, your chances of making this team are very, very low. Demarius Randall and Quandre Diggs had interceptions. And those were the main highlights today. Let's spend a little more time on that. If you take a look at this next Brady Henderson tweet, he talks about Colby Parkinson's game in a little more detail. Basically said that he had a great rapport with Geno Smith. Now, having a great rapport with Geno Smith is not the most valuable thing in the world because he's going to be playing football with Russell Wilson. But he caught a touchdown on a jump ball in the end zone and a deep ball up the seam. The jump ball stuff is obvious, right? The jump balls are where Colby Parkinson can really help this team. That's where his skill set fits in. And if he can throw in deep balls up the seam, then wow, we've really got something going on. He also had another long gain over the middle. And I'm not going to assume anything huge based off training camp, but my thing with Colby was I never thought he was going to be a big play threat. I viewed him as exclusively like a red zone jump ball threat. So if he can make plays up the seam, okay. So it goes on to say at 6'7", he offers something very different from the other 2 tight ends on this roster. So I don't know if this team is going to have the creativity to utilize 3 different tight ends in the offense, but it seems like it's worth talking about, and I'm very interested to see if this team can pull it off. As for Demarius Randall's interception, it was actually the first of the Seahawks training camp so far. Seahawks QBs went the first 3 practices of camp without throwing an interception. He brought one in during 7-on-7. He broke on a quick out to pick off Russell Wilson in stride and then raced untouched to the far end zone. So I don't know if Demarius Randall is going to make this team. I kind of feel like he will because he's a veteran, but honestly, Carroll can go any which way with cornerbacks depending on what he sees in camp. And if there's one area where you would hope he knows what he's doing, it would be there. So hard to know if he's going to make the team. His versatility is nice. I kind of would like to have him around for that. But obviously making a pretty good argument here. And then we had the, the interception by, Quandre Diggs. This was on a tipped pass by Trey Flowers. Sorry, I fumbled a little bit there with the tab clicking. But yeah, finally a couple of interceptions from the defense in training camp, the first two of the year. I think that's probably going to cover a majority of what actually happened on the field today. So, um, the only other thing I can say that was interesting is that Rasheen Green seems to be working exclusively as an edge this year, or at least an end. Maybe not a Leo, but a five tech. You would assume he would play a lot of five techs. So, seems like that defensive tackle thing I was talking about with him, I don't know if it's dead, but we must really like the defensive tackle depth we have and feel like we don't need Rasheen Green on the inside. At least not very much. Hopefully this means LJ Collier is moving inside full time. But now I kind of want to move on to some comments from the coaches, specifically Carroll, so let's move on to that. He had some comments on Sean Mannion. Doesn't have anything to do with Geno Smith, and I'll reiterate, Geno Smith has been playing great so far in camp, according to my sauces, and he makes it clear that Mannion is competing for the number 3 starting spot with Alex Magoo, and that Smith's primary backup job is relatively safe. He just signed Mannion because he had a good workout and he has a good background with Shane Waldron, and apparently Mannion already understands Seattle's offensive terminology really well because he played with under Waldron before. A few more comments from Carroll that I think are worth going over. Monet has dropped a bunch of weight this offseason and looks great so far. The fact that he's dropped a lot of weight kind of intrigues me because I had him pegged as a 1-tech, but if he dropped a lot of weight, then maybe we're looking at him as a 3-tech, and if that's the case, then Poona Ford kind of needs to play more 1-tech because that being the case, the only 1-tech we would really have is Al Woods, and I don't want to see Al Woods on the field 50 snaps a game, not at all. So Poona Ford may end up playing more 1-tech than I was expecting this year. We'll see how we end up balancing it out. That's not totally what I wanted, but it should be totally fine. Carroll also commented on the tempo effect on the offensive line, how the offensive line, in order to keep up with the tempo of the offense, has to stay in good condition. When he said that, I kind of thought, well, maybe they're not in good enough condition right now. Now, that's fine. It's training camp. You're not going to be 100% in amazing shape right now, but he did seem to point that out, which made me think that that's something that maybe isn't going stellarly so far. He had positive things to say about Gerald Everett. Like I said, he runs really hard with the ball, and he also said one more thing that I really want to spend a minute or two on concerning Cody Barton. And this comment, I don't have the tweet for it, but I have the quote here. He said that Cody Barton will get a whole lot of playing time. And that kind of made my antenna go up because, look, he could be making it up. It could be a lie. He could just be saying that. I mean, for all we know, he could say that about anybody, and it won't end up meaning anything. That he'll decide who to play in the games based on who he feels like can help his team the most. But if you take his comments at face value, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So let's break down the linebacker situation right now and talk about this Cody Barton thing. Bobby Wagner, you're paying him $18 million. He has to be playing basically every snap. 199% of the snaps, barring blowouts. Jordan Brooks is in the second year after being drafted in the first round and needs to prove that he can be a basically every down player. At least 75% of the snaps. So you need to put him on the field a lot. And then you have Daryl Taylor, second round pick last year. Linebacker Sam is apparently something that he's looked great at so far. So hyping his ability to play the Sam role that much would sure be kind of disappointing if he wasn't able to play that role full time and do very well at it. So where is this playing time for Cody Barton coming in? Or am I just reading way too much into a generic complimentary Pete Carroll comment? That's certainly possible, but could he just mean on special teams and he's just kind of like just saying it just to say it? Maybe he's just talking about, oh, he's going to play on every special teams play and he's going to be part of punt block packages or something. Or are we actually going to get him on the field and give guys like Daryl Taylor, who, again, I really like Daryl Taylor, might be a little one-dimensional as a linebacker in terms of just trying to go get the quarterback. Could we view Cody Barton as a more appealing option in coverage situations? Could we view him as a more appealing option in maybe even run stuffing situations? I don't know. Cody Barton did not impress me in any real area except for coverage last year. And I do think he's probably our best cover linebacker, but that's not enough. The Vikings proved it last year. All they did was run at Cody Barton, and we kind of got killed by that. So I don't know how to read into that. It sounds a little scary to me. Cody Barton is not the kind of player who I think you need to give a lot of playing time to. And we should have the linebackers in front of him to where we don't need to, barring injury. So kind of a curious comment, but he made it, and that's my interpretation of it. I hope he just means special teams because Cody Barton's been pretty good there. Finally, we have some words on Cedric Ogbuehi, who I did mention in the previous training camp video. So this is kind of a follow-up to the comments I made there concerning the possibility of Ogbuehi competing for a starting job this year at right tackle. So here's the Brady Henderson headline. He has been at right tackle with the Seahawks' #1 offense as the team is keeping its promise to let him compete with Brendon. Ogbuehi began his career at left tackle but wants to play on the right side. He entered free agency dead set on getting that chance. It was a selling point when Seattle re-signed him. Once Pete told me about the 50-50 reps, I knew it was the best shot right here because there wasn't a lot of openings at right tackle this offseason. So that's pretty interesting. Like, previously, when Carroll was talking about letting Ogbuehi compete for the starting job, part of me kind of read it as more of a compete thing, where, yeah, if he looks amazing, of course I'm going to let him play, but we all understand that Shell's a much better player, but seems like he's really practicing what he's preaching there, and I'm not upset about that. I think competition is a great thing, and I think that if Ogbuehi looks better than Shell in camp and training and practice and preseason, then he probably should start. But I don't know. This is kind of interesting to me because it brings me back to that whole idea of always compete, how we used to really utilize that philosophy in Seattle, and then we got away from it a little bit. I felt like there were a lot of times where I felt like a guy was just given his starting role and there were no repercussions for doing things that hurt the team, that you could mess up and you weren't going to get punished for it, or you would have to mess up many times to actually get punished for it. It maybe we're getting back to that. I know this is a small example, and I understand that Brendon is not the greatest right tackle in the world, but I do think that he's pretty good, or at least workable. So the fact that we're apparently giving Ogbuehi every chance to take his job, it probably doesn't mean too much for this position, because I do think Shell is the better player. But maybe it means something for the philosophy of this team going forward, and not just assuming that somebody should keep their job just because they have a bigger name and they make more money. Last year, Mike Upati couldn't play 20 straight snaps without going into the blue tent. And I think it kind of became clear at a certain point that we just needed to not play him anymore because it was ruining the offensive flow to have him go down every quarter almost. And we just didn't do it. We would throw him in at the beginning of every other game. He would get hurt inevitably, and then Jordan Simmons would be back out there. And Simmons wasn't good, but at least he could kind of stay out there. So you'd think maybe eventually you'd just be like, okay, this is our offense now, and it didn't happen. Maybe we're going to move off of that a little bit. But small example, but something that definitely caught my attention. That's really all I can say from training camp yesterday. Some interesting stuff. Very excited about these tight ends. Everything I've read say they look very, very impressive so far, all of them. And I just want to see that carry over into the regular season. I did see some people saying that Wilson seemed to be paying a lot of attention to getting the ball out quickly. And you guys know that if he starts doing that, then I'm going to get excited. All right. Peace out, Go Hawks. See you guys tomorrow.